Hello and welcome to this next episode of the Career Cast. And today, by popular demand, we're going to be talking about CVs or resumes, whatever you want to call it. And today I've got the assembled crowd to join us of specialist career coaches from personal career management. And I'm delighted to welcome Jo Thurman, Colin Lloyd and Adrian Marsh. So welcome to you.
Morning.
Morning.
So, CVs. Now, what are we trying to do with a CV? What's the point of a CV? Adrian, what are we trying to achieve when we're writing a CV?
I always think of a CV as a glossy brochure about ourselves. I think is a good way of putting it. It's not our autobiography, but it gives a nice little taster of who we are and why someone might want to talk to us.
I think that's really important, isn't it? Not an autobiography, because sometimes people do tend to put everything in the kitchen sink in there, don't they? And it's really important to make that very first kind of positive first impression, isn't it? So, Jo, what's some of the things you can do to make that immediate positive impact?
It's about thinking about what message are you trying to get across and who's your reader. So you may not end up with just one generic CV because you may be exploring a number of routes and options. So to Adrian's point, it's not everything you've ever done. It's about highlighting the relevant things that you've done, the best bits of the most relevant, and having your reader in mind. So it's what do they need to hear rather than what do you want to say?
That relevance thing is really key. Colin, so how do you determine what is the most relevant thing to put in your CV?
It depends what you use, and this is going to sound a bit strange, but it depends what you're using the CV for. If it's kind of a speculative CV, then by its nature it's going to be more generic. But more often than not, if you send in a CV, it's an application for an actual role. So the clue is what does the role specification or the job specification ask for? And what you'll be looking to do is evidence as much as you can the attributes that they look for in the specification. As Jo said, it is about making an impact. And if they're looking for a particular set of skills, knowledge or experience, make sure that's highlighted in your CV early on that you have that.
That evidence thing, because of course you can, make all the biggest claims in the world about you being, the most super duper candidate that's ever lived. But yes, you've got to evidence it. So Adrian, what kind of evidence is going to play well? What is it that will substantiate the claims that you're making in your CV?
Yeah, I think sort of specific achievements, it's sometimes surprising to clients how much it makes a big difference if you've got some specific detail about something that's happened. It makes the statements about what you've done much more credible, much more impactful. So I think, achievements, highlighting the impact for your employer, things like whether it's been perhaps recognized by, there's been some official recognition of it. But having just the specific details about something that you've done makes a statement sound much more credible, come alive somehow and make a lot more impact.
Jo, I think quite often we're working with clients, aren't they? And they say, well, I don't know about what my achievements are. I just do my job. Not everyone's got achievements, but how do you help people think about that detail that they can put in their CV that's going to play well?
Sometimes actually not even labeling it an achievement, because as soon as you put the big A word next to it, people can get incredibly uncomfortable and do exactly what you've just said. It's like, I just do my job. And actually, that's why you're probably really valuable to your employer, because you do your job very well. So we don't have to label it with an enormous A word necessarily, but we are trying to look for, as Adrian said, specific examples of when you've contributed to something, led something, made a difference. And in every job, you can find that. Because you're supporting other people in the team, you can find a way of doing something quicker, faster, spending less money on something. You don't have to be very senior to be making that impact. The other thing that always strikes me is that people start their CV by writing their job duties. So it's a good place to start, but that's an internal focus. Those words mean something to your current employer. They don't necessarily mean something to a future employer. So you start with your job duties, but then you've got to make them make sense externally.
Thank you. And Colin, people do get very worried about the tone of their CV, don't they? I was like, I don't want to brag. But sometimes it can be, a little bit underwhelming and just look like a job description, their CV. So how do you get the tone right, do you think, Colin?
I think it's a British disease more than anything else. It's, if you ask someone in this country if they're any good at something, they usually start off saying, well, I'm not bad. And words like that aren't really, they don't have a place in your CV. And I think it's, if you're coming from fact-based situations, as Adrian said before, you're very specific that, I put a process in place which saves the company 5% of its gross profit, then highlighting that is not bragging. It's a statement of fact, but there is that degree of uncomfortableness, if that's even a word, that we need to overcome. And it's not bragging. It's a statement of fact. You have to remember that your CV is a sales document at the end of the day. And provided you can back up everything that you're saying and you're not exaggerating, then that's what you need to do, even though it may feel a little bit uncomfortable and not your normal persona or style to be kind of, look at me, this is how great I am. Unfortunately, or fortunately, your CV is the opportunity for you to be able to kind of display your worth and show people that you are capable and should get to the next stage in the process.
And, I think it was mentioned earlier about you might want to look at, there's different ways to do a CV. Adrian, when might you choose a different format for your CV? Normally it's chronological CV, most recent job first, but are there other occasions when other CV formats would work better for you?
I think, yes, there are a couple of occasions. Maybe with your, one job has a slightly different focus than your previous role. So you're sort of slightly changing direction. You probably have developed all the skills and attributes that they're looking for in that person specification, but maybe that is spread across your last 2 or 3 roles rather than just in your current role. And then it may make sense to highlight your skills first in a functional CV. And sometimes also, if people have, perhaps had things like a career break to bring up children, and then they're coming back, and then they've taken time. So there's sort of some time lapse in the different parts of their CV. Sometimes it makes sense then to, again, highlight the skills that you've got up front. You'll still have the career history, but you slightly de-emphasize it, perhaps putting it on the second page of your CV rather than right up there on the front.
So you're playing around with the order in terms of the relevance.
Yeah.
And what's going to play better with that audience. Now, going back, Joe, to that positive impact, because we know, 10 seconds, people are deciding whether they're going to read the CV further or not. And people wonder about that personal profile right at the start. Sometimes people don't even put a personal profile in. Do you think they should? And if so, what should be in it?
I do think they should, because it's the first thing someone will see when they open your CV. It's a short statement. It's not explaining, I worked here and then I worked here, because that's what it says below. It's capturing a summary that sort of puts a label on you and puts you in some sort of context. So it might say, I'm in office management, I'm an administrator, I'm a finance professional. It might say something about your level of seniority. It might say something about the range of industries that you've worked in. So there's an opportunity to actually almost like introduce yourself to the reader, and then it's a hook that makes them go down and say, so where have they done these things?
Thank you. And most CVs are going to be churning through an applicant tracking system. If you're uploading your CV to a recruitment site or perhaps a large employer, it's going to go in their database and it's going to be filtered accordingly. So, Colin, any advice on, those applicant tracking systems and how you can increase your chances of being shortlisted or, ranked more highly as a candidate?
I think the important thing, if people have not come across this process before, increasingly the recruitment process, particularly for large companies, is being automated. So your CV will be read by a machine, and don't get too upset about that. A human will eventually look at it at some stage, but the first screen can be done by a machine. And there's things that you can do to improve your chances. The first one is making sure that the language that's used in the job specification or the advert, that you kind of repeating the words, not kind of parrot fashion all the time, because that would just look strange, but make sure that the skills that are mentioned and the words that the advert use, you're duplicating, preferably in the profile as well. That first bit that Joe was talking about. There are some big don'ts for ATSs. Some of them are quite old now. And what can happen if you use text boxes or pictures or images, basically the machine doesn't recognize them and your CV comes out in an unintelligible format. So if in doubt, don't use pictures, don't use images, and definitely don't use text boxes. And also, the other thing that ATSs will pick up on, they'll pick up on any grammatical or spelling errors. So after you've checked it once, check it again. A lot of the spell checkers on PCs are American, mind you, so a lot of the ATSs, but ask someone else to read it, actually print it off and give it to someone else to read. And you want your CV to be 100% correct. I think we did some research a few years back, didn't we, Cora? We found out what percentage there was an error. Was it 90 odd percent?
Yes, 9 out of 10 CVs had errors on them.
So yeah, you're looking to avoid the errors because obviously the classic one is saying you've got an eye for attention to detail, quickly followed by a spelling mistake. So yeah, you want to avoid that.
Yes, we've seen some on those surveys. We've seen some funny spellings. Yeah, you're right. Attention to detail with detail spelled DETALE. Yeah, that's not going to help, is it? But I think that's really useful because I think people don't understand quite how the applicant tracking systems work and how you can really just fall at the first fence. You might be a great candidate, but if you're formatting it in the wrong way, it's just not getting kind of recognised by the system. So, Adrian, just kind of thinking about pitfalls and where people go wrong, kind of spelling and grammatical errors is one. But where else do people go wrong?
Oh boy, I think that's a long topic. But yeah, I was going as Colin was speaking, or you were speaking about errors. Yeah, I was just reminded of an example from this week where I tried to call a client using the telephone number on her CV, and it didn't work because there was an extra. She put an extra digit in the telephone number right in the contact details. So that kind of thing, or one letter wrong in an email address, and you may not get contacted at all. So I think just those contact details is so easy to do because you just type it so quickly. You think, oh, you cut and paste, but you've left a number there or something. You can see how it happens really easily, and you can be very blind to them. Because you think it's right. So just starting there with your contact details, absolutely.
So there's lots, because I think those are really common errors, aren't they? And as you say, with these surveys, it was kind of 90% had these kind of errors. And it means that, it's not that difficult to do it all right, is it really? If 90% are getting it wrong, you can increase your chances quite substantially by getting it right. But Joe, what are the other things that you think when you see a CV, just on its own merits, and you think, this CV, they've got it right. This is, something you might have worked on with a client, and this is working. What's the features of a CV that's working well?
Not too long, 2 pages, regardless of where you are in your career, unless you're an academic. Message is clear, not too much text, not lots of blocks of text. So there's some clear white space. You read it, you understand it, and you get a picture quite clearly. And as everybody else has said, no errors that you spot on. And also the language in it can make sense to a non-specialist, because at some point in your process, it's going to be seen by people who may not be your specialist line manager. So it's not focused on full of acronyms that may make no sense externally. So that's what I'd say. Message is clear, not too much text, no errors.
Thank you. And Colin, have you got any kind of final advice about if somebody is sitting down to write their CV this week, what should they be thinking about?
I think it's before you write your CV or before you come up with that 2-page version that Joe mentioned, it's taking some time to work out what you've achieved, what you've done, what your skills, knowledge, and experiences actually are, and have them on a big master copy. And then as you think of things, as you will, just jot them down or put them into that copy. So when you actually physically come to write your CV, when it comes to achievements, you're not sitting there scratching your head. Huge amount of work goes in before you actually write the CV. I think probably the most difficult part is working out over the length of your career what you've actually done and achieved. And it's not something as individuals we do on a regular basis, and that can feel strange. But yeah, so prior to writing your CV, don't sit down and try and write the final draft. Start off with a big master copy, and then edit that down to what eventually will be the one that you use.
I think that's great advice, because I think that's what people tend to do, isn't it? They think, well, I've got to get my CV out, right? I'll sit in front of the laptop and I'll just, blast away and get it down. But actually, it's that thought process beforehand. What is it what are my achievements? What is going to be relevant for that audience? That's going to make it more meaningful. And Adrian, kind of final thoughts in terms of advice that you might give to somebody who's writing their CV this week.
I think it's worthwhile sort of finishing off, perhaps I think was where Joe started at the outset, is remember to tailor it. So it is quite a lot of effort to put your CV together. So therefore people might be, tempted to just send out the generic CV or the one that they use for a previous job, or do, it really does pay dividends, and employers notice the difference if the CV is tailored specifically for an application. So if you can do that, it is worth that extra little bit of effort to tailor it specifically for the requirements of that role.
Yeah, again, I think that's great, because it also shows that you've understood what they're looking for, and you're motivated that you've kind of curated your CV especially for them. So it looks like, you really want the job as well. Well, it's fantastic advice, as always. Thank you so much. If anyone's interested, I do happen to have written the UK's best-selling CV book. So if you fancy going out and buying a copy, that's You're Hired, How to Write a Brilliant CV. But some really, really helpful advice. So thank you, panel. And everyone, I hope you have a good week.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.